everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Maximize Avalara Integrations to Automate End-to-End Compliance. Today we have a special presentation. Our presenters, India and Angela, initially presented this at Avalara Crush in November. Crush is our conference for customers and partners to discuss trends and best practices in tax compliance and to have some fun. So we took the top performing sessions from Crush and we've turned them into a webinar series. And this is our final Crush replay of that series. So if you missed the others, the on-demand recordings are available in the related resources section. Before we get into the presentation, just a friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal or tax advice. On your screen is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review that while I continue with some additional housekeeping. We are recording today's event, so if you want to listen to it again or share it with a colleague, you'll receive the recording later today. The console you're looking at can be customized. Feel free to move or resize the windows. The slides can be resized by dragging the bottom corner. The additional resources section contains some related resources, including today's slides. There are several ways to engage with presenters and fellow attendees today. So first, if you have any questions, you can submit them using the Ask a Question box. We will try and save time at the end for Q&A. You can also submit your webinar troubleshooting questions in that box. Second, you can join our attendee chat. The icon at the bottom of your screen with the two chat bubbles will bring up the attendee chat. We encourage you to introduce yourself, network, and discuss today's topic. So to kick us off, you can drop in where you're calling in from today. Third, you can react to the presentation by clicking the emoji icon along the bottom of your screen, and you can react with a hearts or a thumbs up or some other emojis. And then if you have any technical issues, there is a question mark icon box along the bottom. And if you click that, it will have some suggestions, or you can reach out using that Ask a Question box, and I'll try and help you out. And then something extra fun for this Crush replay, we are offering a $10 gift card to Starbucks or Dunkin'. So there is a picture on your screen that says you can redeem your gift card. So if you click that and fill out the information, check your email, and follow those instructions. If you registered about 24 hours in advance, you're already pre-approved. You'll get that email instantly. If you registered more recently than that, I'll go in and approve you during the webcast, so just hold tight for that. All right, that is all I have for housekeeping. So let's meet today's presenters. First, we are joined by India Anderson. India, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I am India Anderson. I am a director within our product management team. I own e-commerce and marketplace integrations at Avalara, and I have been here for almost 15 years. With me today, we have Angela Goldsmith. Angela, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Angela Goldsmith, Senior Manager of Product Management, and I'm also part of our product management team, and I own our small business to mid-market ERP integrations, and I've been with Avalara a little over 4.5 years, approaching that 5-year mark with Avalara. And I did start out as one of our partners, like some of you in our audience, and working with Avalara integrations from the very first SOAP API integration. So I feel like I've been with Avalara from the very beginning. And with that, let's dive into our agenda for today's session. So we're going to talk about our connector simplification and new configuration experience. Then we're going to talk about our new integrations across our Avalara built connectors. And then for that, we're going to talk about connecting your business systems to a single source of truth for compliance data. So let's start by talking about connector simplification. And with that, India, you were really close to that initiative this year. And so why don't you take us through that initiative and talk about connector simplification?
Yes. So connector simplification, what is it? At a high level, we updated our connectors to have a more simplified configuration experience than they did previously. As part of that, we moved that connector configuration into the central Avalara UI so that as you are onboarding those apps, you're able to stay within that single onboarding experience and then work with the connector as the final step, getting to work with that configuration in part before going off to your financial application to complete installation. It also makes things a lot easier if you're using multiple apps because we updated the language. The way that we talk about features and services that you are enabling or disabling in that configuration, it uses common language across apps. So you know that the word transaction and the word calculate means the same thing regardless of what connector you are configuring. That we believe will reduce your time to implement and speed up your time to value. So making it simpler, using more common language, making it easier to access in a clear path as you onboard, all things that should make that app setup much easier for you. We went from a simplified, an experience where the connector settings could be in many different tabs with many different arrangements, especially different across multiple apps, to a single simplified connector configuration experience. You can see here in this example, we have a couple of toggles and a few drop downs, much simpler than having to figure out what various checkbox and radio buttons meant. And along with that simpler setup within an app, we have now, because it is hosted within the Avalara platform, we have enabled not only can you easily see your connector capabilities that are available based on the services that you have with Avalara, but your supporting team at Avalara, your support assistants, your implementation specialists and engineers, they can see what that configuration is if you do need to contact us for support or for assistance. And it's visible there so that whoever is working with you isn't asking you to either start up a screen share right at the start of the call or is unable to see what you are seeing in your UI. They can see it.
So what I hear in all of that is it made it simpler for everyone, whether it's a customer, a partner, our support agent. It made it simpler. So everybody doesn't have to be an expert, whether it's NetSuite, whether it's Microsoft or Acumatica or Shopify or BigCommerce. Everybody's talking a common language and looking at common screens, and it got a lot easier. And our customers and our partners can get started with Avalara a lot faster and a lot easier, and hopefully with fewer headaches from the time they get signed up to the time they can get started in calculating tax or using those exemption certificate management solutions or HS codes or whatever it is that they've purchased from us. They can recognize that value a lot quicker.
Exactly. It made it a lot easier to set up the common language, especially, so you don't necessarily need to refer to documentation to know what a setting means. And it is really, really important because of the topic that you are about to talk about, the new integrations across our Avalara built connectors.
Fantastic. And we worked really hard on that across many, many teams. And you were so close to that initiative throughout many months. And it's really exciting because, like you said, it led into the new integrations that we've been rolling out all throughout 2024 and well into 2025, as you said. A lot of exciting things that we've been doing. And, it staged a lot of work last year and into this year of end-to-end compliance across many applications, not only just AvaTax, but we also rolled out new products for accounts payable. We updated that. We added VAT compliance to many of our existing connectors. We added cross-border. We updated exemption certificate management functionality in many existing connectors. And we've been building out and continue to build out e-invoicing and live reporting in many of our connectors. The NetSuite connector currently has it. Adobe Commerce has it. And we have connectors that are rolling out this spring and throughout the rest of this year that will also have e-invoicing and live reporting, which is really exciting. And we're going to talk about why that's important. So please stay tuned to the end of the session for Q&A about what's the big deal about e-invoicing live reporting. Yes, that's a teaser. I know that's not fair to make you wait to the end, but yes, we'd like you to stay and listen for that, because e-invoicing and live reporting is the next big deal in tax compliance. But we're bringing all of these functionality and rounding it out into not multiple connectors, but the same connector you already have installed in your platform, so that as you add additional Avalara products, you're just going to be turning on additional settings, not installing another product, not installing another piece of software, but just adding another setting, turning that on. Once you purchased it, you talk to your account manager, and you're going to turn things on. And it's that simple, right, India?
Yeah, exactly. It is so incredibly important that these functionalities, they're built into the existing app. Many of these things, especially in the e-commerce realm, they are compliance functions that are part of that same base transaction. When you make a sale based on where it's destined, you may need to have that and cross-border included within that transaction, critically important. And then similarly for exemption management, when you have that consumer, perhaps you have business consumers who can buy from your website. You don't have to have some separate process that takes days to be able to sell to a tax exempt customer. You can collect that exemption real time and have that calculation that for the thing they want to buy right then, apply that exemption. Having these built into the same connector that you already have installed, that's already working within your workflows, is incredibly important. And as you can see, all of the applications that we have updated, we know that many of you don't use a single financial app to handle all of your business needs. Having these same features available in many of the apps that you would be using, so that when you have multiple integrations with Avalara, you have the same services available in all of them. We see that as incredibly important to enable your success, enable ease of use, and give you a comprehensive, wonderful ability to get value out of those services that you've purchased with Avalara.
And that teed it up really nicely. Thank you for that, India. Exemption certificate management. So here's a great example of you're working right here in Dynamics 365 Finance, and you can see the exemption certificate management right here. You're not having to jump out, go look at another application. You can see, does this customer have the exemption certificate on file? Is it ready to go? Is it active for that location? And you're able to do that right from the application that you work in every day. The person that's managed this, can they look it up? Is it active? Your salespeople can even initiate a request for it to make sure, if they're working with a customer, to go initiate that request so that the customer can upload their certificate if necessary, so that they don't have to do that. And it can happen in a couple of minutes, so that they can upload their certificate, get the certificate on file, and then the sale can be completed and get that exemption on file, so that can happen in a matter of minutes, and you can complete that exemption transaction and not block a sale and not lose a sale because you couldn't handle the exemption in real time. And we also, handle accounts payable transactions as well when you're needing to deal with, okay, my vendor sent me an invoice, but maybe they didn't handle the proper, tax liability. So they might have undercharged me tax, but I want to make sure I'm in compliance. So Avalara handles that use case. I plug in what they charge me. Avalara tells me, oh, wait, they didn't charge me enough. Do I want to accrue that? Yes, I do. And so I accrue that, record that, and I can file the difference on my Avalara returns and file that and stay compliant, so that I don't get into trouble when I go through an audit, because that's the big thing. Auditors love to find those little bits and pieces that got missed, and Avalara helps me maintain that compliance, make sure I stay out of trouble.
And Angela, with respect to accounts payable, I think it's also really important, though though our customer, of course, they're using us for their tax calculation. Your vendors may not be using a service that is as accurate as Avalara, so they really may
Absolutely.
have unintentionally undercharged you or overcharged you because they just aren't
Absolutely.
using a system as refined as ours is to determine the rate that should apply. So really important to be able to see those apples to apples comparisons from your AR to your AP.
Absolutely. And that leads us into yet another area that you're really versed in with e-commerce, and that's cross-border. And here's where you can dive in and explain to
Yeah.
our audience.
Yeah, so like I was saying at the top, the kind of the theme around this is that we're enabling you through a single connector to sell regardless to the geo that you're selling to, right? That consumer at at your website, you're not restricting which country they come from, most likely. So you need to have those services enabled real time in your calculation. And so by enabling our connectors to handle not only sales tax and VAT calculation, but also handle cross-border duties and tariffs estimation. That customer who's making that purchase from you, you are giving them a fully transparent end cost. It should, over time, of course, also reduce returns, right? If a consumer buys something and you're not doing that duties and tariffs estimation on day one, and when it gets to their door, there's an additional $50 or $100 in duties and tariffs that's been added that they have to pay, they very well may refuse to accept the package. I know, some duties and tariffs are quite expensive, 50%, et cetera. So giving the consumer that information upfront to make sure to reduce those return costs gives you an incredible advantage, consumer transparency, and reducing that operational cost that you wouldn't have if that transparency wasn't there. And it's just part of the same transaction information that you were sending us anyway for the purpose of tax calculation. We're using that same information, applying your same business profile, et cetera. And it's that same piece of software, so you don't have to do a second setup. All
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah, and people think, how big a deal is that? I can give a real world example. So I actually worked with a place that was shipping $30 statues, you know, internationally. And the statues were really, really popular, but they weren't assessing those duties and tariffs in the shopping cart. And they had an extreme case that when those statues were shipping to Germany, they didn't have the duties and tariffs. The duties and tariffs on those statues were 3 times the value of the statues. And what happened is they would get to Germany, the customers would reject those statues, and they would get shipped all the way back to the United States. And they
Mhm.
had dozens and dozens of returns. And by the time they got back to the United States, they were so battered and abused from being shipped overseas and back that they were completely unsellable. So
Mhm.
so here they had not only the cost of shipping those statues out, then getting them rejected and returned, they came back in an unsellable state. So they then had to destroy hundreds of these products. So they had several pallets worth of unsellable destroyed product. And so that's a real world example of where
Yeah. And
you could avoid this whole misstep.
yeah. And all of those consumers too. All of those
Yeah.
consumers in that market thinking, well, gosh, they're not telling me what it actually costs on day one, losing trust in them. And then, having the disappointment of, having to return those
Yep.
statues that I'm sure that they were really excited to get. It's
Exactly.
incredibly important to make sure to set yourself up for success and use all of this
Exactly.
day one.
Right. So, it was a lose lose all the way around. Disappointed customer, a loss to the business because, not only did they lose in the costs of all that shipping, but they also had a huge product loss and a write down. So, and it would have been a really easy thing to avoid had they just had that little plug-in to have that and have that upfront cost so that the consumer could make an informed choice.
Yeah.
Super easy solution to avoid a huge problem. And those a real world example that
Yeah.
could have been easily avoided.
Exactly. And we hear those same stories from customers all the time where they, oh, my supplement is taxed at 100% in this country. I had no idea because I wasn't yet using your service, and I'm getting all of my products returned from my consumers there. I was trying to launch in this new geo, and now I'm having to rebuild my business plan because of the consumer appetite, but, based on these things I didn't know because I wasn't doing that type of research. I think it also we'll talk about that as well. It has
Yeah.
a similar impact, right? So if you're not applying that calculation, again, that consumer could have a surprise at the end. And this again, having it within the same app, being able to surface the same information. Here, we've highlighted we are populating this information all to the same tax area within your app. So if you are working with a consumer facing portal like a shopping cart, they've just got one area to see that information, whether it is VAT rates or if it is sales tax rates, GST, HST rates for Canada, etc. It's populated in the same area automatically by our app. So regardless of where that consumer is located, you're able to surface that information to them. And Angela, for ERPs, it's the same. It's just populated on their invoice and their receipt, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Whether you're doing e-commerce or whether you're doing business in your ERP, Avalara surfaces the same information either side of the fence. Whether, like I said, you're doing it inside an ERP or inside, an e-commerce. And I think that the reason why this has become more prevalent that Indy and I are seeing is during the pandemic, we saw more businesses go global because the world changed and people expanded their businesses. They reached out into new geographies because they had to decide how to do business differently. And so we encountered more of these use cases and more creativity in how our customers and partners decided to do business. And so we saw more of these stories and more of these challenges. And that's why we decided to go global and find more ways to serve our customers with end-to-end compliance.
And I think that's a really nice lead into the next topic that we're going to cover is connecting those business systems with a single source of truth for your compliance data. I know it's considerably more impactful when we are talking about the ERP because you're managing your business through that than it is for e-commerce. Angela, can you talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, it's great that when you start thinking about, oh, I'm connecting one thing to Avalara, whether it's my e-commerce or my ERP, but we've all learned that nobody uses one system, or it's very rare anymore. You've got your
Right?
point of sale, or you've got your e-commerce, whether it's BigCommerce, Shopify, or it's Acumatica, or NetSuite, or Microsoft, or QuickBooks. There's always more than one flavor in the mix. And the nice thing with Avalara is we have many, many integrations that we have for you to choose from. And they're all using Avalara as that single source of truth, the same rates, the same rules that are bringing all of your transactional data back to that single source of truth so that you can have unified rates and bring it all back to file and centralize all of that information, all of that data, and bring it all together in one place. We're using the same content, the same logic, the same rules, the same rates, and then bring it all in and file it on a single set of returns. Now, obviously, if you have more than one entity, we also can handle that. So if you've got multiple businesses, multiple companies, if you've got a enterprise operation that has multiple companies within that, we also handle that as well. And we can unify that in a unified compliance hierarchy as well. So no matter how you're structured, we still can bring that single source of truth for compliance and then help you file and remit that as well, so that it all comes together and makes sense and keeps you compliant.
Yeah, I think really specifically for anyone in the audience who's curious what on earth we're talking about, When you create your companies in Avalara, when you create those business profiles that have your nexus of where you collect tax, what you sell, etc., all of that information can be set up in a single company, and you connect all of your apps to it. Or if you have different business profiles that you need to manage when you have separate entities, etc., you can set them up in parent-child relationships. Again, these integrations have this information. They're utilizing the Avalara information to apply where you have said you want to collect tax and the tax liability tax codes that you have chosen. And you can set those all up within the Avalara cloud so that as each of your individual apps are calculating or estimating, etc., they can use the same information. So you will see the same type of result, whether you're working with a consumer or a product in your NetSuite app versus your Shopify app versus your Salesforce app. So that, again, way that you set up your company's parent-child setup, and it can save you a lot of time and make that reporting really, really easy.
Was another reason why we went through all the effort to go and bring the simplification initiative together too, is to bring those settings outside of the platforms where before we had things scattered in all your different platforms. We brought those settings inside the Avalara portal so that you could see them alongside, your Nexus settings, your company settings, and unify that as well so that you could see your application settings alongside your company settings, your what you sell, your Nexus settings, and have that unified experience as well, where it all makes sense, it all comes together. And again, that single source of truth for that global end-to-end compliance experience. So again, bring it all together, making it easier to understand, speaking a common language for you, for Avalara, for your partners that you're working with. And again, trying to make it a lot easier and making it understandable, having that common experience, that common language that we can all speak together, and trying to make it more understandable and less complicated. Because as we all know, tax is hard. We're in that business so that you don't have to be. Exactly. We understand. Nobody wants to do this. Nobody gets up and says, "I want to understand everything about tax because we think it's fun." Well, we kind of do. We do, but that's what we do for a living. And if you're interested, we're always hiring. So, see us after the show, as it were. But that's what we're here for, is we're here to understand that and give you that single source of compliance so that you don't have to, wake up in cold sweats in the middle of the night and figure out how you're going to connect all this, how you're going to make all of these things come together. So it does make sense. So that you don't have to figure out where all your transactional data resides, so that you can get all those filings in all those jurisdictions and figure out, how in the world, the 12,000 various jurisdictions in the United States are going to manage all those filings. And yes, there really are that many jurisdictions in the United States. And, they seem to come up with new little nuanced jurisdictions with, various retail delivery fees and other fun nuances that come up.
And every time the new stadium is built or a town decides to implement 911 coverage, there's tons of reasons why tax jurisdictions exist. And we have a large team of people who track that so that using our system, don't have to. I think, Emily really teed us up well to talk about that end-to-end compliance view. Let's talk about, so what we're seeing here. So you specialize in ERP. We're starting at the AP side. So tell us a little bit of what information is available from this consolidated, centralized compliance view.
Yeah, so let's talk about how it happens in the day-to-day, the real world. So let's say I buy a whole bunch of staplers for my business and my vendor sends it to me and I got my invoice. And lo and behold, the vendor undercharged me on my tax. So I put my invoice in and I put in the tax they charged me and I run it through an envelope that says, "Oh, wait, they undercharged me on my tax."
And they were not using Avalara.
They were not using Avalara. They were using something else. And so Avalara says, "Hey, I was undercharged tax by $4.25. Do I want to accrue that so that I make sure that I don't get into trouble when I get through an audit?" And I say yes. And so that records that. in my ERP system and records the liability. And it also records it in Avalara so that when I file my returns, I can remit that to the appropriate jurisdiction. And, and there's my variance, and I'm good to go.
Yeah. And Angela, with our new Avalara for accounts payable, you don't have to say yes every time, right? You can set a threshold for things to be automatically.
Absolutely.
So again,
Absolutely.
take you time.
Yes, there's a lot of bells and whistles on our new AP that lets you set percentage thresholds, dollar thresholds. I can set up various vendors that way. So I can have certain vendors that are trusted where I don't even have to say yes. It will automatically do that for certain vendors. I can set those thresholds by vendor. So there's certain vendors I can review. Others I want to not review, that they're just trusted and it all goes through. So I have a lot of flexibility as to how I set and configure that, and, you know, kind of make it cater to my desires for what I want to do, vendor by vendor, and only the vendors I want to. So very flexible tool.
Yeah, that's a great tool. And then when you are working with those tax exempt sales, so think about it's B2B, but from the other side, where you're
That's
the
right.
you're the right? Avalara
Exactly.
ECM built into your apps. Now I know for e-commerce, it's particularly useful when you have that enabled in your cart. So you have your consumers submitting those certificates real time. It helps to prevent you from losing a sale because, you know, with the tax rates as
Yeah,
they are in the US, that might be up to a 12% price difference between
absolutely.
you and another business. Really important. But for the capabilities for your ERP users, it's kind of even more extensive because you have so many more back office users spending more time. Can talk a little bit about those capabilities you have in your apps?
Absolutely. So this is a very popular feature in our ERP systems for not only just the clerks that are managing it to keep the exemption certificates on file, being able to retrieve them and see them, see the status. Do I have them for the right locations? Are they valid? Do I need to request a new one and get it? Do I need to revoke a certificate, which is another feature that we have built in? You know, being able to download those certificates as, you know, an image file or a PDF. We have all of those capabilities to be able to do that in real time directly from the application. Here's an example showing it in NetSuite. You know, we can do this in a multitude of our applications built right in. And if you go to the next example, I believe we show it in e-commerce. And here we're showing it where it applies the exemption right here during the sales transaction. So, you know, you can go request that certificate, get it applied, and then have that applied directly on the sale to ensure that you don't miss the sale. So we had talked about that earlier in our conversation. So you get that certificate, and then now you can also do that in commerce. And, you know, we've wired that not only in e-commerce applications, but we're actually able to do this too we have this integration in our NetSuite shopping cart as well. But India, go ahead and talk about this in the B2C shopping cart here that's in your portfolio.
Yeah, exactly. So when you are working with a cart, you know, scalability and latency are incredibly important because you've got your consumer there on the hook. Here's an example showing a really common just business to consumer sale domestic in the US. So if there was an exemption applied here, these rates would be at zero. This breakout shows the exact tax jurisdictions that were applied. If you are utilizing one of our more industry specific tax areas, so if you're using Avalara to handle not only your sales tax needs, but additional taxes like recycling fees, bag fees, bottle deposits, etc. All of that information populates to this same area through that same transaction that you're sending to Avalara to give that consumer the transparency so that they can see exactly what regions and jurisdictions were applied and what types of tax were applied. I know as a consumer, being a specialist in the tax space, it really helps me to understand whether someone is actually collecting the right things. You know, I want to make sure that I am paying accurate tax as well. And when we look at international, again, very similarly, you can see those breakdowns of the different tax types that may apply. Here we have an example where we had VAT and duties and tariffs applied. So again, providing that single spot where all the information is referenced for your consumer, whether it's in a cart or on the invoice that you're sending out. Yeah. And we have also the same type of support for B2B international. We're breaking down the codes and the calculations, and we have all of that information, again, available using common language and common settings, so that when you have all of those features available within your single or multiple apps with Avalara, it doesn't make it an infinitely more complex configuration and onboarding experience.
And for those of you that are familiar with that, we also do return the full messaging that is legislatively mandated. So we do return all of that so that it does come back for your invoices so that you can be compliant. So if any of you are concerned about that, we do bring all of that back so it does spill out on your invoice and you can format all of that on your invoices so that you remain compliant. Because that's one of the things that does often get asked during the sales cycle is, do you get all those messages and all of that? Yes, absolutely. It does come back and it'll display and you can place that on the invoices wherever you'd like. So we bring all of that back for you.
Yep, exactly. And we can see here, we also will show a breakdown of HS codes and calculations for those duties and tariffs. Now, when we're talking about after the transactions have completed, so when you're going through your reporting and reconciliation, again, we have that information consolidated for you within the Avalara portal. This example is a consumer use transaction, so that Avalara AP functionality. Now, Angela, here we have a transaction that would have come from your NetSuite, your Dynamics 365, Finance, etc.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what we're showing on the screen here.
So here you can see purchase transactions in two ways in Avalara. You can see it in kind of what the normal way, like you would see an AvaTax transaction, but we also have a consumer use transaction view as well. And so you can see that breakdown and it'll show you a couple different views because you can have ones that might need to be reviewed. Again, based on your settings and your configuration with AP Tax, you get a lot of flexibility based on how you've configured and chose how to handle those. So you get a lot of different views where you might need to review those or ignore those, or it might need to decide, oh, I want to review and then accrue them. So there's two different views that you get to look at those, a transactional view as well as this consumer use view. And there are a multitude of reports that are available in our Avalara portal. So this is just the two different views that you can see for reconciling your AP or consumer use tax. And then we've got another view that we've got here that is showing the sales tax side of the view that gives you a detailed view. So you've got kind of the summary, and then you can drill into the detail of the transaction that gives you the full tax breakdown at the summary, and then line by line that breaks down all of the tax details for that transaction, gives you document details that you can tie back to the transaction in your source system, whether that's the ERP, an e-commerce system, a CRM system, whatever the source system was that brought it in. You could, even if you're uploading via batch, and that's one of the system things that we often don't talk about enough. You can actually import and upload your transactions via batch uploads to Avalara. But we often don't talk about that very often, but you can do that. You may be using something else to calculate, but you can import into Avalara and just use our return solution. We also have what we call extractors, which are very popular. You might not be using Avalara to calculate your tax, but you're using our extractors to basically suck the information out of your source system like a straw and bring it into Avalara for using our reporting and return solutions. And you would use these interfaces to see what you brought in, and then use our returns to remit and pay to the jurisdictions your various returns. And that's often a way that customers have their first Avalara experiences. They start with their returns, they get to know Avalara, and even with the extractors, we often tell you, hey, this is what AvaTax would have calculated if you were using our tax calculation engine, but it's a great way to get to know us, see what would happen, and you get access to these reporting tools as well.
Yeah, very, very similar to the AP variance. We have essentially what is an AR variance between what Avalara would have calculated and what was extracted. And again, just to highlight in case anyone in the audience missed it, this is a view of our AP or consumer use transactions UI, and this is a view of our AR or sales transactions UI. Again, on the theme with they're laid out in a very similar way. You can tell that there is a difference, right? It says transactions across the top compared to consumer use transactions, but the information is laid out with enough commonality so that we're trying to make it easier for you to understand what you are looking at with those same detailed summaries based on the type of tax, the type of transaction that you are looking at. And within that, we also have reconciliation tools. Now, I know for my portfolio, reconciliation are often trying to catch where you may have had something done via your POS system compared to your cart, where that POS system may have been offline. Angela, for ERPs, it's a little different. Do you want to talk a little bit about what these reconciliation utilities enable your users to do?
So, as we all know, technology is not perfect. And since we're talking across the internet between systems, we know outages happen. Sometimes things don't go the way we all planned. So we have these reconciliation tools that basically look at what's in your source system versus what's in Avalara and surface, hey, there's a difference here. Maybe it's in your ERP system, but isn't in our system. Or maybe there's a mismatch between the two systems because something got out of sync. And it's a way for you to look at your system and reconcile between the two. And it's a great utility that many of our users had asked for historically at some point, and it's a way to reconcile before you finalize your returns and just make sure everything is trued up. Because again, we know technology is imperfect, internet outages happen, or maybe there was a glitch on one side or the other. Sometimes source systems have bugs, something happens, something goes astray. While we have amazing uptimes, and we have, a great system, we call it active, where, our data systems roam around to make sure that we have that amazing uptime. But, again, technology is imperfect. And so that's why we provide a multitude of ways for you to reconcile and make sure that things can be trued up before you finalize and lock your return and file it. But this is one of many tools because we know you as the user would prefer to stay in your source system rather than go look at the reports on our side.
When you're working on that day to day.
You're working on that day to day. And believe me, having been a user and been a consultant in the past, I'd rather stay in the one that I sit at my desk every day anyway. So that's why we built these utilities. So if you could sit there and look at it there and correct from that end, that's the user's preference. So that's why we built the utilities.
Exactly.
And so
and they enable
you'll
you
see
to
them.
send those transactions back to the cloud, to Avalara, if you do need to reprocess them, if something was not posted to Avalara, etc. So it's not, these tools are not only giving you a report of deltas, but you can also take action directly within them.
Exactly. So you can make corrections, select a bunch of them, retransmit, and it'll make the updates. And it makes it a lot more convenient, easier to use, user friendly. That's the intent. Again, making it, less burdensome on you as a user, and user-friendly tools. That's the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. And with that, I think we have time for Q&A.
Great. Yeah. I'll bring up some Q&A. I do just want to have a quick reminder. I pushed this out to the audience, but just wanted to reiterate that this webinar is not eligible for CPE credit. So that's why we have not had the poll questions that we usually do for webinars. But speaking of a poll question, we do have one that we just want to slip in. If anything today sparked your interest and you would like follow-up from an Avalara sales representative, you can click yes to this question, and we will pass your information over to our sales team or to your customer account manager. So you can take a moment to answer that, and we will get into the Q&A. So I want to thank India and Angela, and we had some other people on the Avalara team helping answer questions via the chat. So I know we've answered some of them, and then we have some saved. And Angela, you kind of teased this question earlier about what is e-invoicing, what is live reporting. We wanted to save that question for Q&A, just so we could get into the content a little quicker. So if we want to dive into that question now.
So e-invoicing and live reporting, it really originated globally. And it was because in several countries, there was a lot of tax fraud. I know, gasp, clutch the pearls, but in countries, people, businesses were not always being truthful about what they should be charging for tax and remitting to various jurisdictions. And so those jurisdictions mandated that as businesses were transacting sales, that they needed to report what they were transacting in real time or near real time to the government jurisdiction. So hence live reporting, and then they would follow up with remitting after. So basically, as they're transacting business, they're saying, I'm doing business right now, and this is what I'm calculating, rather than after the fact, after a period of time, a month or a quarter later, then telling the government. And lo and behold, remittance and compliance has gone to, 80 to 100% in those countries now. And so,
and it's also, you hit on something really important. It is reporting it near real time. You're reporting at the detail level of each of these individual sales or refunds have to be sent to the government reporting entity. It is not what we may think of as traditional reporting your sales in aggregate at the end of a reporting period. So having e-invoicing and live reporting available in your Avalara integration, enabling you to send that real time as you are processing those sales and returns. It's incredibly important because it is, when I think about the logistics of you having to do all of that individually offline, it's incredibly complex. Having it done as part of a business process on each transaction makes just a ton more sense, because it's not reporting an aggregate total. It's reporting each individual transaction.
Yeah, and it's reporting it at the line level, what the items you're selling, the kinds of item. It's incredibly detailed, and there's a lot of information around the transaction, the type of transaction, the items themselves, a lot of classification of information. For anyone that ever has dealt with EDI or electronic data interchange, for those in the audience that know anything about it, if you're dealing with the big box stores like the Targets, the Costcos, the Walmarts, et cetera, of the world, and transacting business with them, then you're probably familiar with what EDI is. This is the grandchild of EDI. That's what e-invoicing is. And for anyone in the audience that thinks, well, this is a global thing, this isn't a US domestic thing, no. It's already being piloted in the United States in some jurisdictions as a voluntary thing. So, this is the future of compliance. It's because, government jurisdictions want to get paid. They're going to find ways to, ensure compliance. And so, it is spreading like wildfires through various countries because they want to know that businesses are transacting, that they are properly charging the correct tax rates and reporting the correct amounts that they have collected and remitting the correct amounts. So, we are watching this spread through many, many countries, and Avalara is at the forefront of this and ensuring that we are going to help our customers and partners be compliant, which is why we are, rapidly building out integrations, and our content is at the forefront of this for many, many countries, and that's why we're doing this rapidly. And one of the things that we are doing with our integrations that is particularly unique in the marketplace is not only are we building integrations, but we are, with our integrations, building default maps for the countries to help our customers basically map out the data to give them a starter map, which none of our competitors are currently doing. And mapping the data is highly complicated and highly complex. But we want to give our customers a starting point because it is complicated. It is very difficult to understand, and we don't want to make this hard on our customers and our partners. And that's why we're going that extra mile, as it were, to give them a starting point, because we know this is going to be hard. And so we want to give them a starting point.
Yeah, and we also, within our e-invoicing and live reporting, we're also building a B2B network. So we have over 2 million browsable businesses where we have that information available for you. So it helps, not only are we helping with your setup, we're helping with your compliance there. So it's an incredibly, being a part of your workflow as you're making those sales that you need to report. That's kind of a no-brainer, but we also make it easier on the setup and the research side as well.
Great. And if any attendees are interested in hearing more on this topic, we're actually having a webinar at the end of the month. It is Global Mandatory E-invoicing by Country. So you can look for that link in the related resources. And the presenters will be breaking down what this e-invoicing mandate means country by country. So be sure to check that one out. So going on to some audience questions, how can I tell what features are available in my app?
Yeah, so when you're looking for the features that are available in your app, there are a couple ways. So obviously, if you are already using an Avalara app and you go to that configuration, the features that are available for you from the services that you have will be available to configure. If you are considering to start use a different feature, or maybe you're thinking about adding a new service with Avalara, you can go to the release notes for your integration to see what features have been released and are available. Or, of course, beyond release notes, you can look at the setup guides, and if there is a special setup for that feature, there will be that will be included within your setup guide there. So a few different ways to see. Again, simplest, if you already have the app installed, is to go see what's possible to configure. We make the services that the app supports that you already have with Avalara configurable to make that less of a headache for you.
Thank you. Our next question, I think, is referencing this slide. I will bring it back up. It says, why were these apps targeted, and is this the full list?
Yeah, well, I think so. From my side, so these apps were targeted because when we were looking at making these features available across our portfolio, we knew we needed to start somewhere. And we tried to start with apps where we know those businesses who use those apps are proactively trying to grow globally. So we knew for some of these apps, the country support outside of the US would be really critical to support. We also knew that we had many users on these apps, so we would be able to improve the experience of the most Avalara customers by choosing to start to implement these features in these apps as a start. again, wanting to focus on improving your life when you're using multiple integrations with Avalara and where you are looking at growing globally. So that was most of what was going into decide the apps that we chose there.
Okay. Next question is, how real-time are Avalara's tax rates? Like, would the new tariffs be in there already?
So our rates are real time. When you're calling it, you're getting the real rate right then. And as far as, how often are we updating? We have researchers working every day, and we publish updates twice a month. And if there are updates from any jurisdictions that come in that are, urgent and immediate, then we will push out special updates as needed urgently. But we are constantly researching and keeping up as legislation pushes it. So we are all over it.
Yeah, generally most jurisdictions announce it ahead of time, but we know that those announcements come out every day, so that minimum twice a month catches most things. But our system is set up. We're focused on scalability and responsiveness as well, and so we want to make sure that we're not blocking you from being able to collect a tax you want to collect. So we have capability to change those when things are different than expected.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the most critical parts of our business. So we have to be able to pivot as needed.
Hmm. We've had a couple questions related to the Shopify integration and what's going on there. So maybe if we could summarize that for the attendees.
So Avalara released our Shopify integration last year. Since our initial release, we have been increasing the features there. In short, if you are using Shopify as your e-commerce solution, this new Avalara app, you can use it regardless of your Shopify plan. It's no longer locked to just Shopify Plus users. And we've worked diligently to add in these features that we've been discussing here. So you have not only sales tax calculation, we also have an item sync to sync your product catalog to the Avalara cloud. We support VAT transactions and cross-border duties and tariffs estimation. That actually just came out. You may not know about that yet. And we are working on ELR that is on our planned roadmap. So again, the features, and exemption management. So all the features that we talked about in here, including a product sync utility that helps to save you some time with that Avalara hosted simplified UI, exemption management, VAT calculation, cross-border duties and tariffs, sales tax, etc., with ELR coming soon.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we are getting close to the top of the hour, so we will wrap it up. We did have a few other questions that were a little specific, so we will review those examples and use cases and get back to you. But I just want to thank India and Angela so much for presenting this at Crush and then recording this again so we could bring it to a wider audience base. So thank you so much. Great expertise with this webinar. I just have a couple things to close us out. I just want to thank everyone for attending. We hope you enjoyed this session from Avalara Crush. You will receive a post-event email later today with a link back to this console to view the on-demand recording, access the slide deck, and view the additional resources. And then just as a quick reminder, if you wanted that fun surprise gift card that's for this session, you do need to claim that now before we close out the program. It's only available to those viewing the live webinar. So if you click that button now, you'll get access to that. So we just want to thank everyone again for attending, and that concludes today's webinar.